corporations problem from July of 1990 is, to my way of thinking, a classic essay question from this topic. Take a look at the call of the question. 1. Has Abby, Barb, or Mutual violated Rule 10b-5 under Section 10b of the Federal Securities Exchange Act? Discuss. Well, we can kick back and relax. This is an easy question to organize. We've got 3 defendants. They're both being charged, or they're all being charged with the same statutory violation, and we know the elements. So we know what we're going to say about this, or at least we know how we're going to organize what we're going to say about this up front. It's very easy. It's fairly complicated. There are plenty of ideas to talk about, but all we've got to do is connect the facts about Abby, Barb, and Mutual with the elements of liability and reach a conclusion. It's not a big deal. 2. Has Barb incurred any potential non-statutory liability? Discuss. Well, Barb might be facing civil liability. They're asking for theories of liability. Typically, these will arise from torts or contracts. Perhaps some of the special details of corporations law will arise here as well. So this is a call of the question that gives us a lot of hints about what our answer is going to look like. So with those ideas sketched out, we go to the top of the question and we have a look at potential securities fraud. In paragraph 1, we meet Abby. She is the first possible 10b-5 defendant mentioned in the first call of the question. She is the CEO of Oilco, and she's eating lunch with several Oilco executives when she sees her business school classmate, Barb. Barb is the second listed 10b-5 defendant in the first call. Abby was aware that Barb was a prominent local stockbroker. In an unusually loud voice, Abby tips Barb. She states to her fellow executives, "I bet my former classmate would give her left arm to know that tomorrow we're going to announce a tender offer for ALT Corporation." Well, you don't have to be an expert in securities law to know that that is material, non-public information, and that Abby has the intent to tip Barb. It looks like there's going to be some liability. And we can think about Barb as a tippee. Does she know that she is hearing non-public material information? Answer, yes. Moving on to paragraph 2. Barb overhears the remark, and as soon as she gets back to her office, she buys 10,000 shares of ALT Corporation for her own account. And God bless capitalism. In paragraph 3, she then telephones Mutual and tells its CEO, quote, "If you're smart, you will buy ALT Corporation this afternoon." Now, that looks to me like a hot stock tip, rather than being a specific disclosure of material, non-public information. Mutual gets the hint, however, and buys 50,000 shares of ALT using Barb as a broker. So, presumably, Barb is going to profit further as a result of this transaction. In paragraph 4, Barb visits Cora, a neighbor that she doesn't like, and at Barb's suggestion, had recently purchased the stock. Barb tells Cora that she had heard ALT shares were about to decrease, and she felt badly about it, lying. So Barb personally buys the shares back, and it's 100 shares more going into Barb's account. These she buys from Cora. Now, let's take a quick break here. I don't think that we have to be too judgmental in life. But isn't Barb pretty despicable? We know about her feelings, and we know that she's just committed fraud. So I think we can come up with some non-statutory liability that Barb is going to face as a result of this transaction. And you don't need to be a great scholar in remedies to intuit that compensatory and punitive damages owed Cora may be something in Barb's future. Next, in paragraph 5, we find the announcement of Oilco making the tender offer at a price 50% above the current market price, and about 1 month later, the tender offer is completed. Barb and Mutual get about 50% profits on their shares. And we are told Abby has not purchased any ALT shares for more than 3 years, and that takes away the idea of short swing profits. So then we get the call of the question again. And it looks just as straightforward now as it did earlier, except we've got a lot better idea about the non-statutory liability that Barb is likely to face in the second call of the question. So now, please turn and have a look at the outline of issues that I've presented. And here again, I don't think I'm doing anything counterintuitive with regard to 10b-5. I'm focusing on Abby, the plaintiff, and then I focus on the elements of statutory liability. You'll see that those elements are not finding a home in this outline. But if they find a home in your outline, that's fine. For my purposes, it seems that completing within an hour is a little easier if you don't break it down into tiny pieces. But it's always okay to break an issue down to elements when you know them. Moving to part 2, with regard to Barb's potential liability under 10b-5, she is a tippee. So we focus on her as a defendant, on the elements, again, and, of course, on the plaintiffs, and then we reach a conclusion. But we're not done yet with regard to Barb. Not only is she a tippee, she also is a tipper, and we will consider those facts in Section 2b. Then, with regard to mutual, this is a much more simple question than the others. I don't have any internal organization for it. It's really just a short answer question, and as you'll see, that's what I give them, a short answer. And then, finally, with regard to Barb's potential non-statutory liability, I look at two different situations, the purchase by Barb for her own account, and then the purchase of the ALT shares from Cora. Two different potential aspects of her civil liability outside of the securities laws. All right, well, that sets up our answer. Let's take a few minutes to peruse the answer that I've presented. Look up front in the first paragraph and my response to the first call of the question, and as is so often the case, I lead with the facts. I indicate what Abby did, and I indicate that the tender offer is inside information. I also point out that Abby does not appear to have directly profited from this tip, but she was attempting to help her former classmate Barb by making a gift of this inside information. Well, that's good enough for Abby to be deemed to have violated Rule 10b-5. So now we go into the details. We look at the 10b-5 plaintiff. Here it would be the SEC, and we go into the elements of statutory liability. I compress them all, and I talk about them in one little paragraph. I just think there are enough issues in this pattern that we don't need to spread it out unreasonably. But if you spread it out, don't think that it is per se unreasonable. Our job here is to spot the issues, to break those issues into pieces, and to connect the facts to the pieces. Do that, and you're going to get passing scores to the essays, regardless of how much they may superficially agree or disagree with my answers. The bottom line, as to call up the question 1, is that Abby has violated Rule 10b-5. Next, we focus on Barb's potential 10b-5 liability, and here again, Barb is a proper defendant because she appreciated the value of Abby's tip and she acted on it. And in the first paragraph of my analysis to part 2, I go into all of those factual details. Barb knew that Abby had breached her duty, and consequently, Barb is going to face some liability too, almost for sure. We look at the elements of statutory liability, and again, materiality, reliance, scienter, all appear to be present. Next, we move to Barb's liability as a tipper. Here, the tip is being made for personal gain. She got a commission from the purchase, and no doubt her reputation improved when word got out that her client made a 50% profit. The only problem is that Barb is not an insider for 10b-5 purposes. It's one step removed. So, unless Barb is deemed an insider, she won't face liability as a tipper. But there's no problem. We'll be able to nail her as a tippee. Next, we turn to mutual, the shortest issue and the one that I spend the least time on. Certainly, mutual used Barb as a broker, and the problem here is no facts are present that suggest mutual knew that Barb was an insider or that Abby had violated her fiduciary duty to the extent of mutual's knowledge. Simply put, mutual didn't know Abby had done wrong. They didn't know that Barb had done wrong, and so I don't see how they reasonably can be found liable as a tippee under Rule 10b-5. Finally, we turn to my favorite part of the question: has Barb incurred any potential non-statutory liability? Well, first we look at the purchase of ALT shares for her own account. She isn't an insider. She didn't have a duty to disclose the specific fact of the takeover. So even if she's an insider, she can't face liability for this transaction because there's no privity. But with regard to Barb's purchase of ALT stock from Cora, there is a very strong fraud claim present. Barb lied to Cora about the direction ALT stock was headed, and she lied about her feelings. I just think this is despicable. Although, it's true, a lot of defendants on bar exam questions are not exactly the flower of humanity, are they? Anyhow, what happened is, Barb worked this fraud, she profited from it personally, and Cora can seek restitution of the value of her shares, including Barb's profit, or a constructive trust over the shares themselves, and she can seek punitive damages for fraud. So, the lesson, once again, remedies is central to your success on any California bar examination. This question, although a corporation's question in form and substance, also contains key remedies issues. So, a word to the wise: the more you know about remedies, the higher your final score is going to be on the bar examination.